I had everything and wanted to die. Only then did I understand what life truly is. Leo Tolstoy. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it and let's get started. He was born into luxury, not just comfort, but ancient halls echoing with aristocratic power, walls lined with portraits, books in languages most would never speak, horses, land, servants, chandeliers that burned through the night. Leo Tolstoy was not a man of the people. He was a man above them, from birth. But something cracked, not all at once, like a golden mirror that slowly begins to fracture, barely visible at first. He had the wealth, the fame, the admiration of the world. They called him a genius, a prophet, a legend. And yet, inside him, silence. A silence so loud, it roared. He walked through his estate, massive halls where every footstep echoed like a question with no answer. People bowed their heads to him, but he felt like a ghost. Something wasn't right. It wasn't that he lacked meaning. It was that every meaning handed to him felt fake. Religion told him to obey. Society told him to perform. His family told him to be grateful, but his soul kept whispering something else, a faint whisper that said, "This isn't real. This is a performance, a perfectly crafted illusion, and you're the main actor." Tolstoy didn't wake up one day with a revelation. The truth gnawed at him slowly. First, it showed up as boredom, then disgust, then despair. He began to look around and realized everything he was taught to love was a lie. He looked at other people. They didn't seem to notice, or didn't want to. They played their roles with joy, ate their meals, talked about God and honor and success. But to Tolstoy, it all looked like sleepwalking in a burning house. The deeper he stared into this fire, the more it burned him, but he didn't turn away. He started writing, not for glory but to survive. His books weren't stories, they were escape tunnels, letters from the front lines of a war between truth and illusion, a war inside his own chest. And when war and peace made him immortal, when the world cheered, clapped, celebrated, he felt nothing, not pride, not joy, just an empty ache, deeper than ever before. Because now he knew, even genius, even love, even art, can become cages, gold-plated, velvet-lined, seductive, but still cages. He wasn't angry, he was awake. And when you're the only one awake in a world asleep, it doesn't feel heroic, it feels like dying. That's the part they don't tell you. They say truth sets you free, but first, it destroys everything you thought was real. It strips you naked. It burns your idols. It leaves you alone in a room with nothing but your own reflection. And then it asks, "Are you ready to see?" Tolstoy was. He walked straight into the fire, and he didn't look back. Because once you've tasted the real, no matter how bitter, how painful, how devastating, you can't go back to sweet illusions. You can't unsee what you saw. And that's when his real story began. Not the writer, not the nobleman, but the man who cracked the code of the human lie and chose to live without it. He went to war not out of patriotism, but curiosity. The battlefield wasn't heroic. It was senseless, brutal, absurd. Men screamed, bled, begged. Orders made no sense. Death came without logic, without glory. In that chaos, something inside him shattered. He saw that bravery was often madness, that medals were handed out like distractions. The war wasn't noble. It was a machine grinding up lives, and no one dared to say it. He returned home, hailed as a hero. Women adored him. He tasted passion, seduction, obsession. But love, too, turned out to be a mask. Not connection, but possession. Not giving, but wanting. The more he tried to hold love, the more it slipped through his hands. It was not the answer. It was a mirror showing how lonely he still was, even in someone else's arms. Then came fame, massive, worldwide. He couldn't walk the streets without being recognized. He was admired, quoted, worshipped. But fame felt like a bright spotlight pointed at an empty stage. People loved his image, but no one really saw him. Not the fractured, doubting, restless self behind the myth. Success didn't fill the hole, it widened it. The more he achieved, the less he believed in achievement. He turned to faith. But the church was theater, rituals without substance. Priests who spoke of love but knew only power. They praised him, then condemned him. They offered salvation but demanded obedience. He wanted God, but not through middlemen, not through fear. He searched scriptures, prayed, fasted, but the silence remained. The sacred wasn't in the words. It was somewhere else, raw, direct, beyond dogma. Everything began to unravel. His books, once his pride, felt like lies. His name, a burden. His family, strangers. He saw clearly. All his life he had been fed illusions, success, romance, religion, morality, all shiny wrappers with nothing real inside. The world ran on stories, and everyone believed their own. But he couldn't anymore. Most people never question the frame. They live inside the painting and never ask who painted it. Tolstoy tore through the canvas, and behind it was nothing. A blank wall, no meaning, no script, just a terrifying freedom. That's when the panic came. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. He imagined death constantly, hanging from a rope, slipping under the ice. He didn't want to die. He wanted to stop lying. He wanted to stop pretending this world made sense when it didn't. His journals became a battlefield. Pages and pages of a man trying to stay alive, not physically, but spiritually. Every sentence was a scream beneath the surface. What is real? What matters? Why keep breathing when all this is hollow? But even in the collapse, a new voice began to rise, faint, unformed, a whisper in the ruins. It didn't promise answers. It didn't speak of salvation. It only said, "Begin again. But this time, don't lie." And so, he did. Not everyone survives the search. That's the truth most won't say. The question of meaning isn't soft, it's sharp. It cuts. Some people touch it and bleed. Others drown. Kurt Cobain had money, fans, immortality in music. But he saw the edge and stepped off. His lyrics weren't rebellion. They were warnings. Cries of someone who felt everything. Too much. He couldn't bear the weight of a world where nothing felt solid. And in that silence, he pulled the trigger. Because not finding meaning hurts, but seeing that there might not be any is worse. Steve Jobs conquered the world, changed how we think, speak, live. But on his deathbed, he spoke not of success, but of regret. He said that external things fade, that wealth means nothing, that love, presence, awareness were all he missed. The man who built the future realized too late. He never truly lived in the present. Elon Musk flies rockets, builds machines, creates realities. But even he, behind the genius mask, has said it out loud. Sometimes I wish I didn't know how empty it all can feel. That sentence, quiet, almost hidden in interviews, echoes deeper than all his tech. Even giants feel small when staring into the void. Michael Jordan, the ultimate winner, confessed that after his final championship, he spiraled. Depression. Emptiness. The mountaintop didn't bring peace. It brought silence. Because when the cheering stops, all that's left is you and your unanswered questions. Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, wasn't poor. He had palaces, servants, power. But something inside him cracked. He walked away from everything, not because he hated it, but because he saw it was not enough. His search led him to silence, hunger, years of nothing, but he stayed in the question, and from that silence, something was born. Not an answer, a path, not certainty, but peace. Tolstoy walked among them. Different time, same hunger. He knew the stories. He read the scriptures, the philosophies, the science. He tried to reason his way into meaning. It didn't work. The more he thought, the more he drowned. Logic gave him structures, but not answers. Art gave him beauty, but not truth. Religion gave him rules, but not soul. The only thing that remained was the raw experience of being alive. Waking up, breathing, looking at the sky, the feel of grass under bare feet, the sweat of honest work, the silence of a child's gaze. Moments that couldn't be explained or owned, only lived. And there, in that nothingness, something shifted. He wrote about it later, quietly, not in manifestos, but in letters, diaries, scattered pages. He said the meaning of life isn't a sentence, it's a way of living, not asking, but being, not understanding, but staying present, even in pain, especially in pain. He stopped looking for the answer and started looking at life. That was his shift. That was the secret. Not everyone survives the search because they keep looking for something outside themselves, an idea, a purpose, a reward. But meaning isn't found. It's lived. It's in the act of being fully here, even when it hurts. Tolstoy didn't escape the void. He made peace with it, and then he built something inside it. That's what separates seekers from survivors. The real turning point didn't come during his youth, his fame, or his novels. It came when he could no longer lie to himself. He was surrounded by applause, family, legacy. But inside, something was rotting. He couldn't sleep. He would wake in the night, gasping, terrified of death. Not the physical moment, but the idea of disappearing into nothing. He didn't fear hell. He feared silence. A silence so vast, it swallowed everything, even meaning. In that silence, the question stabbed him over and over. What is the point of this life if it all ends in darkness? He confessed years later that he had considered suicide daily, not out of despair, but clarity. He said, "If everything I believe in turns to dust, then why pretend?" He looked around, his estates, his wealth, his influence, and saw only illusions. Everything he built stood on foundations that meant nothing to him anymore. It wasn't sadness, it was betrayal. He had betrayed himself by living a life everyone admired, except the one who mattered, the one inside his skin. That's when he made a vow: no more lies, not to himself, not to others, not to God. If he couldn't find truth in the world, he would tear the world apart to see what lay beneath. And that process was not noble or poetic. It was violent. He stopped attending church. He rejected the institution that had once shaped his identity. He stopped pretending his marriage was happy. He looked at his children and saw strangers, not because he didn't love them, but because he had never truly known them. He had been acting his whole life. He began stripping himself, not just physically, but existentially. He gave up meat, stopped hunting, refused inheritance, dressed like a peasant, worked the land, not to be dramatic, but to test what was left when every artificial identity burned away. And in that fire, he met something real. It didn't call itself God or meaning or truth, it just was. Pure, silent, breathing life. He started noticing the smallest things. A barefoot child smiling in the dust, an old woman's hands in prayer, the curve of sunlight across a floor. These things were not symbols. They didn't point to anything. They were enough. For the first time, he felt what it meant to be alive without asking why. And that feeling, raw, undressed, nameless, was more sacred than all the sermons he'd ever heard. But awakening through pain isn't clean. It tears. It scars. People thought he had gone mad. His wife accused him of abandoning the family. The church excommunicated him. Friends whispered that he was ruining his legacy. But Tolstoy didn't care. Not anymore. He had seen what lay beneath the surface, and he knew that staying asleep was more dangerous than going alone. He began to write again, not fiction, but declarations. He wrote like a man possessed, not by ego, but by clarity. He spoke of nonviolence, simplicity, self-rule. He argued that society itself was built on lies, that governments, economies, religions, and even families were often machines of control, not love. He called for rebellion, not with guns, but with truth. And that truth began with one thing: stop lying, stop pretending, stop hiding from the terrifying simplicity of life as it is. This is where most people flinch, because the idea of pain as a gift, of suffering as a doorway, sounds cruel. But Tolstoy didn't see pain as punishment. He saw it as purification. Not romantic, not poetic, but necessary. Like a fever that burns through infection. Like a storm that clears the sky, pain is not the enemy. It is the force that breaks the shell of illusion. In his journals, he wrote that every moment of real clarity came after deep agony. He said that joy without honesty is decoration, and peace without suffering is sedation. The meaning of life, he believed, was not hidden in books or temples. It was in the act of living without illusion, in waking up, no matter how much it hurt. He stopped asking for answers. He stopped trying to be good, holy, or wise. He began, simply, to be, to live as a soul, not a role. And in that surrender, in that complete letting go, he found something unshakable, not happiness, not enlightenment, but a kind of stillness, like standing at the center of a storm and realizing you are not the storm, you are the silence it spins around. This is what he tried to teach, not with sermons but with his life, that we don't need to find meaning, we need to burn away everything that isn't real until meaning is all that's left, until life speaks for itself, until truth is no longer an idea, but a breath, a gesture, a heartbeat. Pain was not his enemy. It was his guide, and through it, he was reborn. Most people think the enemy is outside, the system, the lie, the world. But Tolstoy knew better. He realized the most dangerous force lives within, not the dark parts we hide from others, but the ones we hide from ourselves. That was his true terror. Not death, not exile, but the possibility that he had lived a life of virtue while secretly serving his own ego. The possibility that even his awakening, his rebellion, his pursuit of truth, had been contaminated by the same hunger for control, recognition, superiority. That was his shadow. He wrote obsessively about this fear, that he might have replaced one illusion with another, that he had turned from nobleman to prophet not out of transformation, but out of pride, that his refusal to obey wasn't holiness, but dominance, that his need to be righteous had made him blind to the people around him. He began to question everything, not with paranoia, but with brutal honesty. Had he truly changed, or had he just changed masks? He saw the faces of those who loved him, his wife, his children, twisted by confusion and pain. They didn't understand why he rejected the world they built together, why he demanded they follow him into the fire, why he couldn't just be a great writer and a good man. He accused them of clinging to comfort, to possessions, to roles, but secretly, he feared they were right, that he too was clinging to his need to be pure, that his search for truth had become a weapon. That realization gutted him. The shadow is not some demon in the dark. It's the part of you that speaks with your voice, that justifies everything, that hides inside your noblest intentions. Tolstoy looked it in the face, and it broke him. He began writing less, speaking less, watching more. Every word he said he questioned. Every impulse he examined, not to punish himself, but to make sure the light he followed wasn't just darkness in disguise. In this silence, he saw the truth. You can't kill the shadow. You can't purify yourself out of being human. All you can do is see it, acknowledge it, stop pretending it's not there. The more you fight it, the more it wins. But when you turn toward it, not with fear, but with attention, it starts to lose power. He stopped trying to be a saint. He started trying to be real. He let go of the fantasy that he could become perfect. Instead, he chose to become conscious. He accepted that he would always carry the shadow, that every truth he spoke might be tainted, every act of love might still carry a trace of control, every sacrifice might still have ego hiding underneath. But that didn't make them worthless. It made them human. This was the deepest shift, the one no book could fully capture. He began to live with contradiction, to let his flaws exist without shame, to stop dividing himself into light and dark, sinner and saint, hero and coward. He became whole by refusing to divide, and in that wholeness, he found peace. People often romanticize this part of his life. The wise old man in simple clothes, walking barefoot, writing letters to the world. But the truth was messier. He was still angry, still afraid, still stubborn, but he was aware, and that awareness changed everything. It didn't erase the shadow, it illuminated it. It made it visible, and in that visibility, it lost its grip. He stopped trying to change others, stopped preaching, stopped demanding. He started listening, observing, letting the world be what it was, instead of what he thought it should be. And in that surrender, something rare happened. He became soft, not weak, soft, open, gentle. He began to laugh more, to hold silence longer, to look people in the eye without judging them, because he had finally looked himself in the eye and survived. That is what he feared most, that he would go through life never meeting his true self, that he would die a stranger to the man he was born to be. That fear drove him mad, then drove him free. His shadow never left, but it no longer led. It wasn't a performance. He didn't sell his land and give away royalties to impress anyone. He wasn't trying to look holy or start a movement. He was trying to survive, not physically but spiritually. Living the way he used to live was killing him from the inside out. The money, the praise, the fame, it had all turned to poison. So he chose something radical. He chose to live without lies. He began with the surface. He stopped wearing noble clothes. He dressed in simple linen, like a peasant, not as a statement, but as a reset. He gave up fine food, ate what the workers ate, bread, porridge, cabbage. He refused servants, preferring to sweep his own floor, carry his own water, clean his own tools. It wasn't humility. It was detox. Every luxury had become a chain, every comfort a sedative. He wanted to feel life raw, without filters, without privilege. Then he went deeper. He gave away the copyrights to his books, the same books that had made him rich. He didn't want to own words, didn't want to profit from truth. He believed ideas weren't property. They belonged to everyone, or to no one. His family was furious. His publishers were confused. But he had already made peace with the cost. And then came the hardest part, confronting the structure he had built around him. His estate, his marriage, his inheritance. These weren't just physical things. They were stories, narratives about success, power, legacy. He began tearing them down piece by piece. He told his children he wouldn't leave them money. He told his wife he wouldn't play the role of the patriarch anymore. He told his followers he wasn't their leader, just a man, trying, failing, learning. People around him didn't understand. Many left. Some stayed but grew bitter. They thought he had gone insane. But insanity, he thought, was living a life that didn't match your soul and calling it normal. He wasn't crazy. He was finally honest. And that honesty came at a brutal price. He no longer belonged anywhere. Too poor for the elite, too rich for the peasants, too radical for the church, too spiritual for the atheists, too real for the revolutionaries, too rebellious for the traditionalists. He became an outcast. But for the first time in his life, he felt free. He worked with his hands. He chopped wood, planted vegetables, walked barefoot in the mud. He read scripture, not for doctrine, but for wisdom. He listened to silence, not for answers, but for presence. He began to see life not as a problem to solve, but as a mystery to live. Children loved him. They sensed his softness. Animals trusted him. He would walk alongside dogs, horses, chickens, as though they were equals. His eyes changed. They no longer searched for something. They simply saw, and what they saw was enough. He was not at peace every day. He still argued, still got angry, still struggled. But now, there was no mask, no pretending, no role to play. He had dropped the script, and in its place, he found breath. He didn't preach simplicity as a moral code. He lived it as medicine. Complexity had made him sick. Layers of expectation, ambition, performance had drained him. Simplicity was the cure. Not minimalism, not aesthetics, just reality, bare and unedited. People came to him looking for wisdom. He gave them silence. They wanted advice. He asked them questions. They asked how to find truth. He told them to stop lying to others, but first, to themselves. That was his great experiment. Could a man live fully, honestly, awake, in a world built on sleep, illusion, denial? Could you strip away every mask and still survive? Not as a saint, not as a hero, but as a human. He didn't know the answer, but he was willing to live the question every day until the very end. He was old. His beard had turned white, his back slightly bent. His voice had softened, his steps slowed. But inside, the fire had never burned brighter. In fact, it had changed color. Not wild, not chaotic, but deep. Blue flame, quiet, focused, unstoppable. His fame had only grown. Around the world, people read his books as if they held sacred knowledge. Governments feared him. The church condemned him. Rebels worshipped him. But he belonged to none of them. At home, tension poisoned the air. His wife, once his confidant, had become his opponent. They argued endlessly. She couldn't understand why he was tearing down the world they built, why he denied his legacy, why he kept giving away their money, their future. She loved him deeply, but he had become a stranger, a monk in the shell of a husband. His children divided. Some followed, some turned away. Tolstoy's home, the place he once found safety, had become a battlefield. So, one night, without warning, he left, disappeared, took a train, no destination, just away. The newspapers exploded. Tolstoy missing. Tolstoy escapes. His followers speculated. His enemies celebrated. His wife panicked. But Tolstoy didn't run in anger. He ran for peace. He wanted to die without lies. He didn't want to die in a mansion, surrounded by servants and shadows. He wanted a quiet place, a place without performance. But his body betrayed him. On the road, he fell ill. Pneumonia, fever, weakness. A local station, Astapovo, became his final refuge. They laid him in the station master's house. Simple bed, white sheets, Cold floor, rain outside, death approached, slow, calm, inevitable. He didn't fight it. Doctors came, priests too. They wanted to save his soul, record his last words, force him to repent, to reconcile, to conform. He smiled, refused, not out of pride, out of clarity. He wasn't afraid. He had already died once, the day he stopped pretending. Everything after that had been a bonus. In those final hours, he wasn't surrounded by saints. He wasn't reciting scripture. He was whispering about life. Not heaven, not sin. Life. He spoke about trees, about a woman's touch, about a smile, about work, about dirt under fingernails, about silence. Not as poetry, as truth. And this is where most people miss the real secret. Tolstoy didn't find meaning in God as an idea. He found it in what he called real life. A life stripped of symbols, stories, rewards. A life where every moment was lived consciously, honestly, and fully, no matter how ordinary. He wrote that meaning wasn't something hidden far away. It wasn't locked in a book or buried under philosophy. It was here, now, in your breath, in the way you hold your cup, in how you treat the person who doesn't matter, in the decision to tell the truth even when it costs everything. But here's the secret most people still don't see. He discovered that the greatest lie wasn't religion, or wealth, or even fame. The greatest lie is that meaning has to be found. It doesn't. Meaning isn't out there waiting. Meaning is created, in real time, by how you live, by your presence, by your courage to look at your own life without filters, by the way you choose, moment after moment, to be awake. He said that most people wait. They wait for a sign, for success, for peace, for permission. They keep waiting, and die waiting. But the truth is, life doesn't wait, and neither does meaning. Meaning begins the moment you stop performing and start participating. He realized that meaning is not a noun, it's a verb. It's something you do, not something you own. You mean your life into existence by how you live it, how you love, how you fall, how you get back up. And if you never look away, not from pain, not from truth, not from yourself, then you are already living it. This is the secret people miss because it's not dramatic, it's not mystical, it's simple, almost too simple. That's why it's so hard to see. The meaning of life is not a destination, it's how you walk. And now, the part that could change your life, if you let it. Tolstoy wrote down one thing near the end. It wasn't famous, it wasn't published. It was scribbled in a notebook no one paid attention to for years. In it, he said, "The deepest freedom is this, to need nothing and give everything." That line alone is a key. To need nothing means to stop waiting for life to give you something. Stop needing purpose, needing love, needing validation, because the moment you stop needing, you start seeing. And to give everything means to live as if nothing is owed to you, to give your attention, your care, your honesty, your time, not because it will come back, but because it's yours to give. That's the paradox. You find the deepest meaning not by receiving, but by releasing, not by finding, but by becoming, not by holding on, but by letting go. That's what Tolstoy learned. That's what he died knowing. And that is what he left behind, not in books, but in silence. Tolstoy wasn't alone. Across centuries, continents, cultures, the greatest minds came face to face with the same silent question. What is the point of all this? What are we really here for? And strangely, they all arrived at the same answer. Even though they spoke different languages, wore different clothes, lived different lives. Socrates said that the unexamined life is not worth living. He wasn't chasing knowledge, he was chasing honesty. To look at yourself without illusion. He died drinking poison rather than betray truth. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire in the world. But his journals, written in private, were filled with reminders to be humble, to serve, to stay present. For him, meaning was in integrity, doing what's right even when no one's watching. Buddha gave up everything, his palace, his name, his status, not to escape the world, but to see it clearly. He sat in silence until it broke him, then rebuilt himself from the inside. His message was simple. Freedom comes from letting go, not from holding on. Leonardo da Vinci painted, invented, dissected, explored. But at the end of his life, he said he had offended God and man by not doing more. Not because he failed, but because he had seen how infinite life could be. Meaning to him was in curiosity, in not stopping the search. Einstein, one of the most brilliant minds ever, said the most beautiful experience is the mysterious. He wasn't proud of equations. He was in love with wonder. For him, meaning was in awe, in looking at the universe like a child. Nelson Mandela found meaning in forgiveness. After decades in prison, he came out not seeking revenge, but unity. He said, "Resentment is like drinking poison and hoping it kills your enemy." He turned pain into peace. That was his path. Mother Teresa lived in poverty, surrounded by death, but smiled more than most millionaires. She said the most important thing is to love without getting tired. Her meaning was service, invisible, quiet, constant. Viktor Frankl survived the Holocaust, lost his family, lived through hell, and still wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." He saw that even in suffering, we can choose meaning. Even when we lose everything, we still get to decide who we are. Martin Luther King Jr. knew he might die for what he believed, but he marched anyway. He preached love in the face of hate. His meaning was courage and connection. And Tolstoy, he found meaning in real life, in the dirt, in the silence, in waking up each day and choosing to be honest. His legacy isn't just books. It's a blueprint for how to strip away the noise and listen. All these people, different times, different struggles, but the same destination. They stopped searching for meaning out there. They started creating it in here. The top 10 minds in history didn't chase success. They chased truth. And what they all found, in different ways, was this. Meaning is not something you wait for. It's something you live. Every breath, every act, every word. It's already in your hands. You just have to stop waiting and start living it. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.